In 2011, a man in Brooklyn pulled a filthy city dumpster off a curb, hauled it into his workshop, and started cutting into the steel with a grinder. 3 weeks later, that same dumpster had hardwood floors, a working shower, a rooftop deck, and a price tag under $2,000. It ended up on national television. Reporters called it a stunt, an art project, a gimmick for the internet. But the man who built it wasn't finished. He was just getting started, because a few years later, he moved to a city with thousands of people sleeping outside every single night, and he asked himself a question most people never bother to ask. What if the trash sitting in every alley in America was actually the answer to one of the country's most expensive, most stubborn problems? By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how ordinary Americans are turning discarded dumpsters into real livable homes for people who have nothing. You'll see the actual materials, the actual costs, and the actual people whose lives changed because of it. And you'll find out why, in city after city, the same officials who admit these homes work are also the ones trying to stop them. This isn't a story about charity. It's a story about what happens when someone stops waiting for permission. Here's a number worth sitting with for a second. On any given night in America, over 700,000 people have nowhere to sleep. Roughly 1 in 5 of them is a child. The traditional answer to that problem is slow, and it is expensive. A single unit of government-built housing in a major city can take 5 years to approve and cost more than $500,000 to construct. 5 years. $500,000 for one room. Meanwhile, in industrial lots and alleyways across the country, there is a different kind of raw material just sitting there, unused, rotting, technically worthless, discarded dumpsters, construction bins nobody wants back, steel boxes that contractors dump and forget about the moment a job wraps up. Nobody looks at a dumpster and sees a floor plan. Nobody looks at a pile of construction waste and sees a front door, except one person did. And what he built next didn't just house a few people quietly, out of sight. It became a blueprint that other builders, other volunteers, and even other cities are still trying to catch up to, more than a decade later. His name is Gregory Kloehn. And before any of this started, he was simply an artist who liked working with materials nobody else wanted. After his first dumpster build went viral, he moved back to Oakland, California, and started walking a very different kind of neighborhood every single morning. Alleys packed with construction waste, sheets of plywood, broken bed frames, old car consoles, discarded refrigerator doors, washing machine parts, all of it dumped illegally, all of it just sitting there, slowly rotting in the sun. And a few blocks away from all that waste, he kept walking past people sleeping under tarps and inside cardboard shelters, trying to stay dry, trying to stay hidden. He started wondering if there was a way to connect those two problems. Could he build a livable, lockable home in a single day, using nothing but what was already lying around for close to nothing at all? So he tried it. A discarded refrigerator door became a front door. An old washing machine porthole became a window. Wooden shipping pallets became load-bearing walls. Sheets of plastic construction wrap became a waterproof roof. The only things he actually had to buy were nails, screws, glue, and paint. The total cost per home came in under $100. Each structure was built on small wheels, and that detail mattered for a reason that had nothing to do with mobility. A home on wheels isn't classified the same way as a permanent structure under most city codes, which meant Kloehn could build and place these homes without waiting months, sometimes years, for a permit that might never come at all. He painted every one of them in loud, unmissable colors: cotton candy pink, sunshine yellow, sky blue, fire engine red. He gave them names, almost like they were characters instead of buildings. One he called the Chuck Wagon, another he called the Romanian farmhouse. Little details that turned a discarded dumpster into something with personality, something worth naming. And then, one by one, he gave them away. Over time, he built around 40 of these homes, and he handed every single one to someone sleeping on the street nearby. No paperwork, no waiting list, no committee sitting in a room somewhere deciding who deserved it most. He didn't stop at building them himself either. He started running informal workshops in his own neighborhood, teaching artists, handy neighbors, and even local high school students how to do exactly what he had done. The idea was never that one man could solve homelessness by himself. The idea was that anyone with a saw and a free weekend could build a home for the person sleeping 2 blocks away from them. The very first home he gave away tells you almost everything you need to know about why this idea spread the way it did. Kloehn had spent time photographing homeless encampments around Oakland for a personal project, documenting the makeshift shelters people build for themselves out of pure necessity, out of nothing. Through that project, he got to know a couple who had been living on the street for years, moving from block to block, never quite settled anywhere. When their new home was finished, he didn't just drop it off outside their camp and drive away. He showed up in person with the finished house rolling behind his truck and a bottle of champagne to mark the moment. Sit with that for a second. A structure built almost entirely out of garbage, costing less than $100 in materials, handed over with the same kind of ceremony you'd expect at a housewarming party for a mansion. That's the detail people remember, not the plywood, not the pallets, not even the paint job, the dignity of it, because that's the part every version of this story keeps circling back to, no matter which neighborhood it happens in. No matter which 2 people are standing at that door for the first time. It was never really about the walls. It was about a door that locks, a space nobody else controls, and someone treating you like your life still matters, even when the rest of the world has stopped noticing you exist. Here's where the story gets complicated and where it stops being purely inspiring. An official from Oakland's Public Works Department was eventually asked about Kloehn's homes. The response wasn't hostile exactly. It was something quieter and, honestly, more frustrating than open hostility would have been. The craftsmanship was impressive, the official admitted. But whether these structures were legally allowed to exist under city law was, in his words, a completely separate question. That single sentence captures the tension sitting underneath this entire movement. A person with basic tools can design and build a safe, weatherproof, lockable home in a single day. A city with its zoning boards, its permit offices, and its liability concerns can take months, sometimes years, just to decide whether that home is allowed to remain standing. It's not that officials genuinely believe these homes don't work. Plenty of them will say, on the record, that they do. The resistance almost never comes from the results. It comes from what happens the moment an informal solution built outside the system starts becoming permanent enough that the system feels obligated to weigh in. And this isn't unique to one department in one city. In place after place where people have built quick, cheap, dignified housing out of salvaged materials, the exact same pattern repeats itself. The homes hold up in the rain and the cold. The politics around them do not hold up nearly as well. What makes this story bigger than one man in one Oakland neighborhood is what happened after people outside his own block started paying attention. Builders in other cities began experimenting with the same basic principle Kloehn had proven out. Take something the world has already thrown away, strip it down, reinforce it, and turn it into a small, secure, livable space, all for a fraction of what traditional construction would ever cost. Some leaned on old shipping containers instead of dumpsters. Some worked with discarded trailers. Some stayed close to Kloehn's original method and built almost entirely out of construction site dumpsters and demolition scraps. The exact materials shifted from city to city, but the underlying math stayed remarkably consistent. Homes that would normally cost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to build were going up for a few $100s, sometimes less, using nothing but material that was already headed straight for a landfill. Volunteer groups started forming around this exact model, turning what began as one man's neighborhood project into something closer to an assembly line. No construction background required, no architecture degree, just people willing to show up on a Saturday morning, follow instructions, and build something with their hands. That's the part that tends to surprise people the most when they hear this story for the first time. This was never a story about a single genius solving homelessness on his own. It's a story about how low the barrier to entry actually is once someone shows you it's possible. A saw, a handful of tools, and a pile of material nobody else wanted is enough to change one person's entire night, and eventually their entire life. Here's the detail that took the longest to surface in this story, and honestly, the one that matters most. It isn't that America lacks the ability to solve this quickly. It's that the fastest, cheapest, most effective solutions keep coming from outside the very system that's supposed to be responsible for solving it in the first place. A dumpster home built from scraps can go up in a single day for under $100. A government-approved unit of permanent housing can take half a decade and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Those two very different numbers are describing the exact same outcome. One person off the street behind a door that locks. The gap between them isn't a gap in ideas. It isn't even a gap in willingness. It's a gap in permission. Every builder working inside this movement runs into the same wall eventually. Not a shortage of materials because the materials are everywhere, sitting in alleys, dumped behind construction sites, free for the taking. Not a shortage of willing hands because volunteers keep showing up, weekend after weekend. What they run into is a shortage of legal pathways that let a fast, cheap solution stay standing long enough to actually matter. That's the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath every one of these bright, hand-painted little homes. The hardest part was never building them. The hardest part is being allowed to keep them. So let's put it all together. A man in Oakland proved that a dumpster nobody wanted could become a home with hardwood floors and a working door for under $100. He proved it could be done in a single day, using materials that were already sitting in the alley behind his own house. He proved that when you hand someone a key instead of a form to fill out, something in them changes almost instantly. In a way that paperwork never could. The materials were never the hard part. The waste was already there, in every American city, free, ignored, waiting. The hard part was always permission, and in most places, it still is. If this is the kind of story you want more of, a real overlooked side of how Americans are actually solving problems the system can't seem to touch, subscribe. Stories like this one don't get nearly enough attention, and I dig up a new one every single week. Somewhere in America tonight, there is another dumpster sitting in an alley, dented, rusted, forgotten by everyone who walks past it. And somewhere near that same alley, there is someone lying under a tarp, listening to traffic, wondering if tomorrow is going to look any different than today. Right now, those two things have nothing to do with each other. A piece of trash, a person with nowhere to go. But you've just watched proof that those two things are only ever one person away from becoming something else entirely. A door, a bed, a key that belongs to somebody. The only question left is whether the next person who walks past that alley decides to keep walking or decides to stop, pick up a saw, and start building.